We're keeping Christmas small this year, Mom. Just immediate family. My son's words hit me like a physical blow, leaving me frozen in my own kitchen. The phone still warm against my ear. The cold reality of his casual cruelty sinking in. I stood there, a cup of cooling Earl Grey beside me, the quiet of the house suddenly deafening. Immediate family. And yet I was alone. "Oh," I managed the word a whisper. "Of course, Joel. I understand." He sounded so relieved, didn't he? "Thanks for being so cool about it, Mom. This year's just been a lot. We need something low-key." I nodded, a phantom gesture he couldn't see, even as my heart felt like it was crumbling into 1,000 tiny pieces. "Sure. Take care." Then he was gone. Just like that. Click. The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable kind I'd grown used to after George passed. No, this was a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my chest, echoing in the hollow places where laughter once lived. My gaze drifted to the other mug on the table, George's mug. It's been 17 years since he left me, but sometimes, especially in December, especially in moments like this, I still set his place. Christmas has always been my season. I was the Christmas woman, you see, the one who baked enough cookies to feed an army, who wrestled with tangled lights, who always found the perfect sprawling tree. I sewed those tiny red stockings for every single member of our expanding family, handwriting cards until my fingers ached. It wasn't obligation. It was love. A deep, abiding love I thought mattered. This year, like every year, I'd started early, snatched up gifts during the November sales. A beautiful professional sketch set for Amy, because she's always doodling. A wild, messy science kit for Zach, who lives to explore. A sleek leather briefcase for Joel, something practical, grown up. And for Linda, a handmade aroma lamp, just like the one she'd admired in that glossy magazine I'd spotted on her coffee table. Each gift chosen with such meticulous care, wrapped with golden ribbons, tucked into boxes, ready for the big day. And now, they were staying home. Without me. I drifted into the living room, the room they'd helped me paint last year. Joel mostly supervising. Linda mostly scrolling on her phone. I thought it was a shared project, a bond. Now, in hindsight, it felt more like charity, something they endured. The tree stood in the corner, lights off, bare branches stretching into the dim light. I hadn't decorated it yet. I'd been waiting for the kids, for Amy to place the angel on top, just like she always did. I sank into my recliner, pulling the wool blanket over my lap, and stared out the window. My neighbor's light-up reindeer wobbled in the wind beside a plastic Santa. Children ran past, red-cheeked, clutching candy canes. Everyone was preparing. Everyone but me. I thought the tears would come. They always do. But not tonight. Tonight, there was just that peculiar, pressing silence, and a flicker of something new inside me. Not sadness. Not quite anger. It was colder, sharper. And oh so very clear. The next morning I woke up early. Old habits are stubborn things. A lifetime of school lunches, Sunday roasts, surprise visits, and Christmas mornings that started before dawn had wired me that way. But this morning I lingered. No urgency. No excited whispers down the hall. No tiny feet pattering in slippers. No reason to preheat the oven. Still, my body moved on its own. The blanket pushed aside, slippers found the familiar path to the kitchen. As if Christmas was still coming, just a little late. I made tea, sat by the window. My front yard looked the same. A crooked snowman, icicles glinting. But inside me, something felt utterly unfamiliar. I'd hosted Christmas every year since 1973. Through sickness. Through tight budgets. Through a snowstorm that almost trapped us all. Even the year the turkey caught fire. Didn't matter. Everyone still came. Even if they were late, even if they forgot dessert, even if they never helped clean up, they came. And now? I wasn't even asked. I remember Joel arriving first, always early, checking the parking. Linda later. arms laden with catalog-perfect gifts, wrapped in gold and navy, never a speck of red. Amy and Zach would burst in, eyes wide, demanding to know if the stockings were up, if the cinnamon rolls were warm. I could still feel Amy's small body leaning into me as we read, The Night Before Christmas. I could still hear Zach's squeals when he opened his first bike. But those memories felt distant now, like echoes from someone else's family. A movie I'd watched and forgotten. The house was too quiet. Even the refrigerator's hum seemed louder. I glanced at the hallway. The guest room door was closed. The same guest room Joel had once insisted I keep ready. In case we want to stay over sometime, Mom, he'd said. They never stayed. They barely sat. It hit me then how each visit had shrunk over the years. From full days to lunch to just a quick drop-by. And then not at all. The last few Christmases I was the one driving across town. I'd sit politely in their pristine kitchen, handing over my carefully chosen gifts, watching them unwrap them without truly seeing them. Linda would smile, always say thank you, but her eyes were always somewhere else. Joel checked his phone between bites. Amy and Zach were glued to their screens. One year I made my mother's old meat pie recipe. Linda took a single bite. "Oh, that's very traditional," she said. She didn't finish it. I told myself it was fine. That times were changing. That kids didn't understand home-cooked meals or hand-knit scarves. But now I saw it for what it truly was. Distance. Not physical but emotional. Calculated. I stood slowly and walked to the sideboard. In a drawer, all the photos from past Christmases. Dozens. Joel in a paper crown. Amy opening gifts in her pajamas. George carving turkey with his crooked smile. I flipped through them one by one. Then I noticed it. In every single photo I was in the background, holding a tray, carrying plates, cleaning in the corner, smiling, always smiling but never seated, never really seen. I closed the album, sliding it back into the drawer. My hands lingered on the wood for a moment before I turned away. Traditions, that's what I thought I'd built. But maybe I was the only one who remembered them. The guest room in Joel and Linda's house was painted a soft gray-white curtains, a framed quote over the bed. Family is everything. I remember Linda flinging the door open proudly the first time she showed it to me. "And here's your little corner, Evelyn, for sleepovers or long visits. We wanted you to feel welcome." I smiled then, genuinely touched. I even brought over house slippers and an extra toothbrush the next week. Folded my nightgown into the dresser drawer. Just in case. That was 2 years ago. I've never slept there. Never even sat on the bed. After a while I noticed that whenever I visited, the room was always full of something else. Holiday decorations. Unopened boxes. Joel's golf clubs. One time their new exercise bike. "Just temporary," Linda had said, brushing it off with a practiced smile. It didn't feel temporary. I stopped bringing my overnight bag. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More stories, even more unbelievable than this one, are coming. They live in a house I helped them buy. $50,000 toward the down payment, taken from my retirement fund after George passed. Joel had said it was an investment in togetherness. I wanted to believe him. I signed the check without hesitation. Didn't even ask for repayment. They promised I'd always have a place there. And yet, this Christmas I wasn't invited. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the Christmas card I'd received from them last week. A photo of the 4 of them in matching pajamas, in front of a fireplace that wasn't mine. Linda's calligraphy read, "Wishing you a warm and joyful holiday season." No invitation. No mention of dinner. Just warm wishes from afar. I flipped it over. Blank. I thought about their first house, smaller, older, closer to me. Back then, Linda would ask for my help, choosing curtains, organizing the pantry, minding the kids. She seemed to appreciate me. But things shifted. Her smiles became tighter, her compliments more polite, her requests fewer. I once overheard her on the phone. My mother-in-law means well. She just doesn't really fit in with our circle. That was 2 Christmases ago. She hadn't meant for me to hear it. But I did. I never mentioned it. Now I wish I had. They talk about inclusion, about family values. They buy books on mindfulness and donate to holiday charities. But they couldn't make room at their own table for the woman who kept their lights on more than once. I'm not naive. I know Linda always found me a little quaint, too simple. Too much baking soda for cleaning, not enough essential oils. I don't belong in their curated version of life. Still, it hurts. I stood, walked down the hall, and opened my own guest room door. It's nothing special. A twin bed with a crocheted blanket and a tiny lamp George wired himself. But I've hosted so many people here over the years. Friends, neighbors, even Joel once, when he fought with Linda and needed space for the night. It smells like lavender and old wood, and something warm I can't quite name. I sat on the edge of the bed. They built a room for me they never intended me to use. But here in my own home, every room holds a memory. Real ones. Messy ones. Full of noise and food and accidental love. And maybe that's the difference. Maybe they built a house. But I built a home. I told myself I wasn't going to do it this year. No shopping, no wrapping, no endless searching for the best deals. Not after that call. But old habits, they don't die quietly. So there I was, standing in the middle of the department store. Coat unbuttoned, scarf unraveling, list in hand. The same store I'd visited every December for almost 50 years. The same soft carols playing overhead. The same garlands twisted around every checkout. And me still here, still playing the part. Amy liked sketching, so I found the upgraded marker set she'd mentioned. Dual tips, hundreds of colors. Zach was into graphic novels, so I picked up the latest in that series with the strange talking cat. I didn't understand it, but I knew he'd light up. I even found a little jar of imported bath salts for Linda. Rose and sandalwood. Expensive. Delicate. And pointless. For Joel? I hesitated. What do you give a man who doesn't have time to call you? I wandered the men's section, fingers brushing over wool scarves, leather gloves, cufflinks behind glass. I settled on a pair of wireless earbuds. Top of the line. Something sleek, practical, modern. Something that said, I'm trying to stay in your world. I carried the items to the register. The young girl behind the counter smiled. Got a big Christmas planned? I blinked. For a moment I wasn't sure how to answer. No, I said finally. Just keeping it small. She nodded, not noticing my pause. Everyone's scaling back this year. Family's enough, right? I didn't reply. On the way home, the bags felt heavier than usual. I used to feel proud walking back with my arms full. Proof of love. Proof of preparation. Proof of care. Now they just felt like burdens. Proof of something I wasn't ready to name. At home, I set the bags on the dining table and sat beside them. One by one, I unwrapped the items from their glossy store bags. I folded them into tissue paper, tucked them into boxes. I tied each one with ribbon. I even wrote their names on the tags just like always. Joel, Linda, Amy, Zach. Felt automatic, familiar, painfully so. I stared at the stack when I finished. For boxes. For ghosts. Because that's what they were. Not gifts, but echoes. Echoes of a woman still trying to earn a place she already should have had. Looked at the small drawer in the hallway where I kept the old cards. Hand-drawn ones from the kids. Messy scrawls that said, Love you, Grandma, you make the best cookies. I ran my fingers across them. Then I looked back at the boxes. This year, they wouldn't be carried to someone else's tree. Not this time. I placed the finished boxes neatly on the edge of the credenza. Each one a quiet monument to something unspoken. The gold and silver paper glinted in the afternoon light. Ribbons still crisp. Tags written in my best cursive. There was a time when I couldn't wait to see them opened. Not because I wanted thanks, though I won't lie, those mattered too. but because I loved the moment their eyes lit up, the surprise, the pure joy. That's what Christmas meant to me. But now they sat there, untouched, unclaimed, not forgotten, just unnecessary. I stood staring at them for a long time, then did something I'd never done in my 78 years. I picked up one of the boxes, Joel's, and carried it upstairs. In the hallway closet, behind old linens and a broken fan I never got around to throwing out, there was a heavy plastic bin I used to store wrapping paper. I pulled it out, lifted the lid, and placed the box carefully inside. Then I went back down for the others. Linda's bath salts, Amy's marker set, Zach's comic book. All of them fit snug in the bin like memories packed too tightly. I closed the lid. They weren't getting these gifts. Not because I wanted to punish them. Not even because I was angry. But because they didn't think I existed outside of obligation. They built a life where I was a convenience. Someone to call upon when the roof leaked or the babysitter canceled. But not someone you miss. Not someone you make room for. And this year they'd made that painfully clear. We're keeping Christmas small this year. Just immediate family. That sentence wouldn't leave me. Not the words themselves, but the way he'd said them. Casual. Rehearsed. As if he'd been preparing it. As if he knew I might be hurt, but hoped that saying it kindly would somehow make it fine. I thought about calling him. About saying something. About reminding him of all the years I showed up. The birthdays I never missed. The nights I sat up sewing Halloween costumes because Linda didn't have time. The Saturdays I brought groceries when their bank account ran low. But what would I even say? Hi, I just wanted to let you know I exist? No, I wouldn't call. Instead, I walked to the living room, pulled the old wool throw over my knees, and sat with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Across the room, the Christmas tree stood undecorated. I'd been saving that for when the kids visited. For Amy's delicate touch with the ornaments. For Zach's habit of hanging everything too low. For Joel's inevitable teasing. Mom, this tree is as short as you are. But there wouldn't be any visits. Not this year. So the tree would stay bare. Maybe that was better anyway. I took a sip of the cold tea and let the silence fill the space where joy used to live. No sadness, not really. It was something else. A settling. Like dust after the wind. Every year without fail there was a card. Sometimes late. Sometimes smudged. But always there. A folded square with glitter that stuck to your fingers. A scripted Merry Christmas, Mom across the front. And something scribbled inside. Even when the words were impersonal. Hope you're well, love, Joel and family. I kept them. I have a drawer full, tucked beneath old bills and recipe clippings. This year the mailbox stayed empty. Well, not completely. The usual flyers came. Bold letters, discounts. A local politician sent a folded sheet with a photo of his smiling family in matching sweaters. I stood at the counter sorting through it all, half expecting something to slip out. An envelope addressed in Linda's neat handwriting. Or one of Amy's sticker-covered creations. But there was nothing. I turned the stack over, checked again. Just junk. I looked at the calendar. December 22nd. Too late for postal delays. Too soon to pretend they hadn't simply forgotten or ignored. I carried the stack to the recycling bin, my hand poised over the lid. Then I paused, pulled out the card from the councilman and ripped it down the center. It wasn't his fault, of course, but something in me needed the sound. That soft, tearing paper that felt like an acknowledgement, like proof that something somewhere had snapped. The worst part wasn't the silence. I've lived with silence. I sleep in it. I wake up to it. No, the worst part was the clarity. They hadn't forgotten the card. They had decided it wasn't needed. I made a sandwich I didn't want and sat down at the kitchen table. The tree still stood undecorated in the living room. The smell of pine barely clung to the air anymore. I took a bite of the sandwich and stared at the wall. A faded painting of a barn in winter hung there. George had found it at a garage sale 30 years ago. He used to say it reminded him of his grandfather's land, though he'd never actually been there. "I just know," he said once, "that it felt like this." That's what memory does. Fills in the blanks. Makes you believe in something solid that maybe never was. I've been filling in blanks for years, giving Joel the benefit of the doubt, telling myself Linda meant well, believing the kids were just shy, just busy, just teenagers. But a forgotten card says more than 1,000 explanations. It says, "You weren't even a thought." I looked out the window. The neighbor's inflatable Santa had collapsed sideways during the night. It lay slumped against the snow, face pressed into the lawn. I thought absurdly same. I set my sandwich down half-eaten and got up. In the hall closet I pulled out the old photo box. Not the albums. Those were curated. This one was different. It held the unchosen moments. Stray snapshots. Blurry images. Pictures that never made it to frames. I sifted through them, fingers grazing corners, pausing when I reached one from 1996. Joel holding baby Amy in a ridiculous red onesie. Both of them laughing at something off camera. I had taken that photo. I remember it clearly. They'd been staying with me for a week that Christmas, Joel between jobs, money tight. I cooked every day. Watched Amy so they could rest. We wrapped second-hand toys together and made them feel like treasures. No one remembers that now. I set the photo aside. Then another. Joel at 16 standing beside the first car I helped him buy. I co-signed the loan when George said we couldn't afford it. I made the payments when Joel forgot. That car was wrecked within the year. Then the wedding photo. I paid for the cake. Then the hospital photo. I stayed with Amy for 3 nights when Linda had Zach. Slept on a plastic chair. Brought her warm socks. I sat there for a long time holding those pieces. I didn't need a card to remind me who I had been. But maybe they did. The house always smelled like cinnamon by the 23rd. It was tradition. Sugar cookies, snickerdoodles, peanut butter with the Hershey's Kiss pressed right in the middle. Amy used to help roll the dough when she was little. Her fingers too small to hold the cutter straight. Zach would sneak raw batter when he thought I wasn't looking. Joel pretended to scold them but always stole the most once they were baked. Even last year, though they only stayed for coffee, I had the tins ready, labeled, packed. One for each of them. Linda always said, "Oh, Evelyn, you shouldn't have." But she took them all the same. This year I told myself I wouldn't bother. But my hands reached for the mixing bowls anyway. I worked in silence, sleeves rolled up, radio off. My hands knew the rhythm, even if my heart didn't. Butter creamed with sugar. Eggs cracked neatly into the bowl. The sound of the mixer was comforting. Mechanical. Predictable. Unlike people. The first batch went into the oven. I didn't hum. I didn't smile. I just watched the timer tick down like it owed me something. When the scent started to rise, I paused. It smelled like memory, not joy. When the cookies cooled, I lined them up on the counter. Rows and rows of sweetness. A parade of effort, waiting for mouths that wouldn't arrive. I didn't have the heart to frost them. Instead, I opened the tin I would have filled for Amy and started to drop them inside, one by one. The sound of cookie against metal echoed too loud in the quiet room. No laughter. No footsteps. Just me and the ghost of a tradition. I went to the closet and pulled out the holiday tins I'd used for years. Each one had a little name written on masking tape across the bottom. Joel, no raisins. Linda, shortbread only. Zach, extra sprinkles. I read each label like a tombstone. Then I peeled them off. The tape came off clean, like it had been waiting to let go. I lined the tins on the table, not with cookies, just as they were. Empty. Hollow. I stood there a long time. Then took a slow breath and did something that surprised me. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The air hit sharp and bright. Snow coated the porch railing in delicate piles. I crossed the yard and walked 2 houses over to the little blue house where Annie lived. Annie was 6. Her mother, Molly, had moved in during the spring after leaving a bad marriage. We talked over fences, swapped garden tips. I'd watched Annie chase fireflies in the summer dusk. She'd returned one of my pie dishes last week, carefully washed, with a folded note that said, "Thank you for being kind to us." I knocked on their door, still holding the tin. Molly opened, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Evelyn." "Hi. Sweetheart," I said, offering the tin. "I baked too much. Thought you and Annie might enjoy some." Her face softened. "That's very sweet of you. Annie's just in the back watching those old claymation specials." I smiled, and something warm cracked through the cold shell around my chest. "I used to make these for my grandkids," I said simply. Molly hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in if you want." I didn't expect that, but I stepped inside. The house smelled like vanilla candles and popcorn. Cozy. Lived in. A little cluttered. Annie looked up from the couch and waved. "Hi, Miss Evelyn." "Hi, sweetheart." She rushed over, already peeking into the tin. "Oh, did you make snickerdoodles again?" "I did," I said, smiling despite myself. "Just for you." She grinned, already reaching for one. Molly caught my eye and said softly, "You don't have to be alone, you know." I blinked, then shook my head just once. "I think I've been alone longer than I realized." She didn't argue. She just nodded like someone who understood more than she let on. I stayed for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Long enough to see Annie's eyes light up. Long enough to feel useful again. Real. Then I walked home, empty tin in hand, and for the first time all week, I didn't feel invisible. I turned on the tree lights that night. For no one. No audience. No children to clap when the room glowed. No Joel making a joke about energy bills. No Linda adjusting ornaments so they'd look more balanced. Just me standing barefoot on the living room rug, watching colored lights blink in a slow, steady rhythm. The tree was smaller than the ones we used to have. Easier to carry. Easier to set up. I dragged it in myself the week after Thanksgiving, still full of hope then, still believing they'd come. I hadn't decorated it. I had saved that for Amy and Zach, like always. Zach liked the garish ones. Candy canes and felt Santas with googly eyes. Amy preferred the delicate glass balls I let her hang higher, where her brother couldn't reach. But now it was Christmas Eve, and the branches were still bare. The only thing on the tree was light, and I think that's what made it beautiful. Didn't pretend to be full. I sat on the sofa across from it and stared, the glow softening the sharp edges of the room. I could see the reflection of the lights in the window. 2 trees now, one inside, one ghosting the glass. George used to say a tree should tell a story. Ours always did. Not a perfect one. We didn't color coordinate or buy new ornaments every year. We used what we had. Popsicle stick stars. Paper angels yellowed with time. A crocheted snowflake I never quite finished. He'd lift Joel up when he was small to place the topper. Later Joel would lift Amy. It was always a family moment. A ritual. I didn't know then it was something you could lose. I looked at the box of ornaments still sitting, unopened, by the fireplace. I thought briefly of pulling them out, of finishing what we always started. But it didn't feel right anymore. Not because I was angry. Because it would have been pretending. Pretending this was still a house waiting for someone. Pretending they might walk through the door, cheeks flushed, arms full of gifts, saying, "Sorry we're late, Mom." They weren't coming. And this tree didn't need anything else. It wasn't empty. It was honest. I poured a small glass of brandy, the bottle I kept in the back of the pantry for special occasions, though I hadn't opened it since George passed. And I toasted the tree. "To quiet truths," I whispered. The glass clinked against itself. Then I stood and walked to the mantel. There, among old photos and knickknacks, was the framed picture of George and me on our last Christmas together. He wore that ugly green sweater Amy had picked out. I wore a Santa brooch he always said made me look dangerously festive. We looked tired, but we were smiling. I touched the frame gently. "If you were here," I said quietly, "I wouldn't have to explain why this hurts." He always saw things before I did. He was the first to notice Joel pulling away, to hear the silence beneath Linda's politeness, to catch the flickers of disinterest in Amy's eyes. "Don't chase them," he once told me. "Let them come to you." But I did chase. I kept calling, giving, forgiving. I thought that's what mothers do. Maybe it is. But there comes a day when you look at a bare tree and realize it's still standing, even without the ornaments, even without the noise. I turned off the overhead lights and sat down again. The tree glowed quietly. And for the first time this season, so did I. It was almost dusk on Christmas Eve when I heard the knock. Not loud. Hesitant. Like whoever it was hadn't made up their mind about being there. I wasn't expecting anyone. Certainly not family. I paused in the hallway, uncertain. A small part of me hoped absurdly that it was Joel. That he'd come with some apology, some warm excuse. A peace offering of words too late but still welcome. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Joel. It was Annie, my neighbor's daughter. 6 years old, bundled in a purple puffer jacket with one mitten missing. She was holding a pie dish in both hands, wobbling slightly under its weight. "Hi, Miss Evelyn," she said. "Mom said to bring this back." I blinked. The dish I'd sent over with cookies days ago. I'd forgotten all about it. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, reaching for it. "Did you have a nice Christmas Eve?" She nodded. "We made lasagna and watched a movie where a dog saves Santa. I liked it. There were a lot of snow explosions." I smiled, picturing it. "Sounds exciting." She hesitated, glancing behind her toward the street where Molly's car idled, headlights glowing through the light snowfall. Then Annie looked back at me, her voice smaller now. "Mom said I could ask if you wanted to come over for cocoa." I felt something catch in my throat. Cocoa. Not an invitation wrapped in pity. Just cocoa. Simple. Warm. A door not closing. I looked past her to Molly, who lifted a hand in a gentle wave. Her expression open but not pushing. Just an offer. Just grace. "I think I'll stay in tonight," I said softly, touching Annie's arm. "But thank you, love. That means a lot." Annie nodded solemnly. "Okay. Mom says you're the best baker on the street." I chuckled. "She hasn't tried my lemon squares yet." "Maybe next time?" she asked, already stepping backward. "Maybe next time." I watched her skip down the walkway, the empty pie dish still warm in my hands. When I stepped back inside, the quiet greeted me again. But it felt different this time. Less like loneliness. More like a pause. A deep breath. I carried the dish into the kitchen and set it on the counter. Then, without really planning to, I opened the pantry and pulled down the good cocoa. The kind I saved for guests who didn't come. I poured milk into a pan and let it warm, added cinnamon, a touch of vanilla. While it simmered, I reached for one of the tins I hadn't filled. This one hadn't been labeled. It didn't need a name. I placed a few cookies inside and snapped the lid shut. Back in the living room, I settled into my chair by the window with the cocoa and a cookie. Outside, lights twinkled on porches. Cars crawled through the snow with muffled music leaking from their windows. Everyone was going somewhere. And me? I wasn't. Not this year. But I wasn't waiting anymore either. The knock at the door hadn't been the one I expected. But maybe it was the one I needed. Christmas morning came quietly. No rush of footsteps. No sleepy children dragging pillows into the living room. No rustle of wrapping paper or coffee brewing for guests. Just the slow creak of old floorboards and the soft hum of the radiator. I sat in my kitchen robe, hands wrapped around a second cup of tea, staring at the pine tree in the corner. Still undecorated. Still beautiful in its own quiet way. I'd never had a Christmas like this. Never spent one alone. Not really. But I didn't feel empty. I felt clear. After breakfast, I walked to the side drawer in the hallway. The one George used to call my command center. Bills, documents, receipts, all carefully filed in manila folders. I pulled out the one labeled Family Finances. There it was. Every check I'd written over the years. The mortgage down payment. The private school fees. The new SUV Linda insisted was safer for snowy roads. Grocery loans that were never paid back. Short-term emergencies that turned into long-term patterns. Joel had power of attorney over one of my smaller accounts. Just in case, I told myself. In case of an emergency, in case something happened to me. Turns out something had. I dialed the bank. A cheerful young man answered. Good morning and Merry Christmas. This is Evan from First Horizon Bank. How can I help you today? Merry Christmas, Evan. My name is Evelyn Parker. I'd like to make some changes to my accounts. Of course, Mrs. Parker. I'll just need to verify your identity first. We went through the motions. Address, birth date, last four of my social. Once verified, I didn't hesitate. I want to cancel all automatic payments and scheduled transfers associated with my son, Joel Parker, or any accounts bearing his name or access. There was a pause on the line. I imagined Evan blinking at his screen. Understood, Mrs. Parker. I do see some active links. Would you like me to deactivate the power of attorney as well? Yes, I said. Effective immediately. Another pause, then typing. It's done. You'll need to come in after the holiday to sign the final revocation paperwork, but the access has been temporarily suspended. Thank you. Is there anything else I can assist you with? I looked at the untouched gifts, stacked neatly in the bin by the coat closet. Yes, I said. I'd like to open a new trust account under the name of Annabelle Reeves. She's 6. Lives 2 houses down. Another pause. A child? Evan asked, cautious. A friend, I said. Someone who remembers to knock. He didn't ask more. Just typed. When I hung up, my hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From relief. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done explaining myself. Done reaching into my pockets like love depended on it. Done offering parts of myself that no one wanted, only used. That afternoon, I wrapped one of the cookie tins in brown paper, tied it with twine and wrote on the top, "For Annie, Merry Christmas from your neighbor." I walked it over quietly, left it on their porch, and stepped away before the door could open. Back home, I stood at the window and watched the street. Joel wasn't coming. No one from that house was. And for the first time, I didn't hope otherwise. Because no isn't just the absence of a yes. It's a decision. It's a boundary. It's the beginning of something new. The gifts stayed in the bin by the coat closet, untouched. I didn't plan to move them again. I liked them where they were, neatly stacked and sealed. Not as offerings, but as reminders of who I'd been, of what I'd stopped being. I opened my notebook, the plain one I kept for grocery lists and reminders, and tore out a blank page. Then slowly I began to write. Not a letter. Not even a list. Just names. Names of people who had shown up. Not out of obligation, but out of kindness. Molly. Annie. My old friend Cora from church, who still called every month without fail. My late neighbor Stanley's daughter, who always asked if I needed help shoveling after a snow. These were the ones I'd overlooked, lost in my focus on a family that only saw me when it was convenient. I closed the notebook, folded the paper once, and placed it in the cookie tin that was meant for Joel. I'd used that list as my new address book. It was time to reassign my heart. Later that evening, I pulled out my best sweater. Navy wool. Hand-knit years ago. George always said it brought out my eyes. I wore it now, not for anyone else, but because it felt like armor. Then I lit a candle in the window. Not for them to find their way home, but to remind myself I was still here. Still warm. Still standing. I spent the rest of the night writing cards. Not the kind you buy in bulk with scripted messages, but blank ones, simple cream with thick envelopes. I wrote 3. One to Annie. Thank you for being brave enough to knock. You reminded me that kindness has no age. One to Molly. Your warmth reached further than you know. You made space for someone most people overlook. And one to myself. That one took the longest. Evelyn, you forgot for a while who you were, but you remembered just in time. You are not less because they don't see you. You are not invisible because they look away. You are whole and strong and worthy of more than quiet dismissal. Keep going. I sealed it, placed it on my bedside table, and went to sleep with something I hadn't felt in a long time: resolve. I woke up on December 26th to a quiet morning and a blue sky. The snow had crusted overnight, thin ice sparkling across every surface. It looked like the kind of morning that begged for purpose. Not routine. Not waiting. Something real. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check for messages. Instead, I reached for the list I'd made. The names. The people who'd shown up in small, quiet ways. Who'd seen me not as a task or a seasonal duty, but as a person. It was time to return the kindness. I filled 3 tins with the remaining cookies, popped ribbons on top. No names this time. Just small notes that read, "Thank you for being good." Then I did something even bolder. I took the rest of the wrapped gifts, the ones with Joel's name, with Linda's, with Amy's and Zach's, and I peeled off each tag slowly, deliberately. They came off easily, like they'd never belonged. I rewrapped only one, the sketch set for Amy, because that could still bring joy to someone else. That afternoon, I drove across town to the shelter I sometimes donated to. I'd never been inside, only dropped off items in bins, left checks, stayed in the background. But today I parked and walked in. The warmth of the place hit me instantly. Smells of soup, of laundry detergent, of too many coats and not enough space. Felt human. The woman at the desk looked up. "Can I help you?" I nodded. "I brought some things. Gifts. If that's all right." She stood. "It's more than all right. Come in." I followed her into a narrow room where children played with worn toys, and a man strummed a guitar softly in the corner. People looked up, some smiled, some didn't. I placed the gifts on a side table. One girl, maybe 9 or 10, hovered near, eyes wide. I handed her the tin with the smiley face sticker. She clutched it like it might disappear. "Thank you," she said. Quiet but clear. And that was enough. I didn't stay long. Just enough to look around and understand something I should have known years ago. Family doesn't always live in your house. Sometimes it lives in the way someone holds a cookie like a treasure. In a stranger's open door. In the knock of a child carrying back a pie dish. I drove home lighter. Not because I'd given away so much, but because I'd finally stopped giving to people who didn't care that I did. That night I stood by my window, watching the wind lift snow off the trees like glitter. My tree still glowed quietly, bare as ever. But it didn't feel lacking. It felt honest. The phone stayed silent. But the silence no longer felt like punishment. Felt like peace. Joel was the first to notice. It happened on the morning of the 27th, when he logged into the family account to check the automatic payments. He always waited until after the holidays. Smarter to let the gifts go through, the utilities post, the mortgage debit quietly roll out. Except this time nothing had rolled. No transfers, no deposits, no scheduled payments. Just silence. At first he thought it was a glitch, a holiday delay. But then he tried to access the secondary account, the one I had linked to help him manage cash flow during tight months, and found the access denied. His name had been removed. The authority revoked. He called the bank, his voice clipped, impatient. The clerk confirmed it. The account holder had made official changes. Access restrictions were now in place. A revocation form was pending signature. Who? Joel asked, though he already knew. "Mrs. Evelyn Parker," the voice on the other end said. His mouth went dry. Didn't feel real. He sat in his home office, blinking at the screen, half expecting it to refresh with different information. Then he picked up his phone and called me. I didn't answer. So he texted, "Hey Mom, I think there's been some sort of banking error. Can you call me when you get a chance?" An hour passed. Then another. No reply. He started pacing the kitchen. Linda stood by the sink, pouring herself coffee, watching him without saying anything. Finally, he snapped, "Did you notice anything weird on Christmas?" Linda raised an eyebrow. Besides the fact that she didn't send the usual gifts? He turned to her. "Exactly. Nothing. Not a card, not cookies, not a single thing." Linda shrugged. Maybe she's finally pulling back. "I mean, you did say we wanted space." He stared at her. She kept stirring her coffee. "And what about the fact that she didn't call once?" he asked, his voice rising. "Didn't even text the kids?" Linda exhaled slowly. "Joel, you told her we were keeping it small. Immediate family." "She is immediate family," he snapped. Linda didn't reply. At that moment, Amy walked into the kitchen. "Mom, Dad?" she asked. "Did Grandma send presents this year?" They both looked at her. "No," Joel said. "Not this time." Amy hesitated. "I thought she always did." Linda gave her daughter a tight smile. "People change, sweetheart. Maybe she's tired." Zach appeared in the doorway. "But she sent cookies last year. Did she get sick or something?" Joel opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came. Because the truth was he didn't know. He hadn't called on Christmas, hadn't even checked in. And now for the first time something dawned on him. She hadn't forgotten them. She had chosen not to be there. He left the room, phone in hand, and dialed again. Still no answer. He opened the front closet, expecting to find the stack of gifts she usually delivered, left by the door if she thought they were out. But there was nothing. He went out to the porch, checked the mailbox, peeked behind the potted plant where she sometimes left. A tin of cookies with a little note tucked inside. Nothing. No note. No cookies. No Evelyn. Later that day he called the bank again, asked if anything else had been changed. The clerk was polite but firm. His access was gone, and a new trust account had been opened under someone else's name. A child's. Not Amy. Not Zach. Someone he didn't know. That evening he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet while Linda brushed her hair in the mirror. "She's really done with us," he said quietly. Linda stopped brushing. "She cut us off." Still she said nothing. And that, Joel realized, was as close to a confession as he would get. The phone rang just after noon. I saw his name light up on the screen. Joel. My son. My boy who used to sleep with one foot out of the covers. Who once cried because he thought he'd heard a ladybug. The same boy who now only remembered me when something stopped working. I didn't answer. The ringing echoed through the room like a challenge. I sat in my chair by the window, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, watching flakes of snow drift across the road. It rang again, and again, then stopped. Then came the text. "Mom, please call me. I think there's been some confusion. I just want to talk." I set the phone face down on the table. It buzzed twice more before falling silent. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to undo. Undo the silence. Undo the stillness. Undo the decision that finally said, "No more." I understood his confusion. For so long I had been reliable. Not in the good sense, but in the taken for granted one. A pantry always stocked, a checkbook always open, a calendar always clear. But now I changed the terms. And people don't like it when the furniture starts speaking. He called again in the evening. This time he left a voicemail. His voice was tight, measured, too polite, the tone people use when they're trying not to sound guilty. "Hi, Mom. Just wanted to hear your voice. The kids were wondering why they didn't hear from you on Christmas. I told them you probably got busy, or maybe your phone was off. Anyway, give me a call when you get a minute. We missed you." He hung up without saying love you. I didn't miss that part. I sat in the dim light of the living room, staring at the glowing tree, now slightly wilting, but still holding itself with quiet dignity. The unopened gifts were still packed in the bin. I could have called him back, told him everything, that I felt erased, that his just immediate family cut like glass, that I baked cookies with my hands shaking, wondering who I was to them anymore. But I didn't know him that. He knew. He knew the way people do when they've made a habit of ignoring pain signals. Linda hadn't called at all. Amy hadn't texted. Zach, bless him, had drawn me a picture last year. A little crayon snowman with grandma written in crooked letters. I'd saved it. But children grow the way trees do. They bend toward the light they're given. And I hadn't been their light in a long time. I was their habit. And now that habit was broken. Another voicemail came later that night. This time Joel sounded different. Not polished. Just tired. "Mom," he said with a long breath. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I hope you're okay. I know I messed up. I should have done more. Called more. I just figured." He paused. "I just thought you'd always be there." The message ended there, abrupt, like he didn't know how to finish the sentence. Maybe he didn't. I held the phone for a while, thumb hovering over the screen, and then I turned it off. Set it aside. Let the silence return. It didn't feel like punishment. Felt like protection. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be noticed. I was noticing myself. New Year's Eve came in quietly. No parties. No toasts. No countdowns. Just the ticking of the kitchen clock and the soft exhale of wind pressing against the window panes. The kind of night that asked for nothing but honesty. I sat at my table with a single lit candle, a small slice of leftover cake, and my cup of tea. No champagne. No resolutions. Just stillness and presence. Outside, the world rushed toward midnight. Noise, fireworks, glass clinking. Inside, time moved slower. And for once I wasn't trying to catch up. I wasn't bracing for another season of being forgotten. I was exactly where I chose to be. I thought about what I used to give every year. Boxes filled with sugar, sweaters, books, toys. Time. Effort. Money. Energy. Hope. I wrapped it all up in ribbons and sent it out like a message in a bottle. Please remember me. Please make room. And this year I gave it all to myself instead. I gave myself permission to stop chasing people who let go of my hand first. To stop explaining my value. To stop mistaking tolerance for love. I gave myself space. I gave myself silence. I gave myself peace. And then I gave away what remained to those who showed up without being asked. Who opened their doors without performance. Who accepted a tin of cookies as more than a favor. Annie drew me a picture yesterday. It's on my fridge now. A crooked house with yellow windows and Miss Evelyn written in rainbow crayon across the top. Underneath it she wrote, "You make things feel nice." I stared at those words for a long time. Not "you bake well." Not "thank you for gifts." Not "you help us." But "you make things feel nice." Isn't that what love is supposed to be? Joel never called again after the 27th. Not on New Year's. Not after. And I didn't call him. Maybe he will one day. Maybe he won't. But I'm not sitting in that silence anymore, wondering what I did wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I gave and gave and gave until I realized I didn't have to keep proving I was worth being chosen. Because I was never the one who left. I was the one carrying the gifts up the stairs, unopened. Now they stay where they belong, packed away, quiet, no longer begging to be loved. And me? I walk lighter. I smile more. I rest in the dignity I reclaimed. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about return. Not of people, but of self. And if you've ever sat beside an untouched dinner, stared at a phone that didn't ring, waited for a knock that never came, you already know this story. You already carry the ending in your chest. You don't need to be chosen to matter. You don't need permission to stop giving to those who won't truly see you. You are not a backup plan, not a seasonal accessory, not someone's convenience. You are the whole thing. The home, the light, the gift. Have you ever been through something like this? That moment where you realize you're putting in all the effort, and it's not being reciprocated? Tell me what you think or what you would have done in my place. I truly want to know.